additional traffic that this will create. I think that's natural with any urban infill site that you're going to have. I'll get to what we've thought about here, but we picked this site because of its proximity and its walkability to downtown, and our hope is that a lot of the people that will be living there are going to be working from home. They're going to want to live here because they can walk to the amenities that are naturally close. So, they're almost finished with Bonnet Springs Park. That was one of the huge reasons why we selected this site. And then all of the other stuff that's located in downtown. When we first started this project, and you will have much more knowledge than we do, I had spoken with Elise Drumgo, this was probably about 12 months ago, and that there may be the potential to open up Lake Wire Drive again. I don't know if that's still on the table for the city, but we would definitely be a huge advocate for that because it would take a lot of stress off of the traffic. And we do have two entryways into the garage. Both of those entries are on grade, so there will be people going out of one side, people going out of the other. So it won't necessarily stack both sides of the garage. People will be able to get in and out. But I agree with you. It will create traffic, but this is where people want to live. They want to be close to that. And so, naturally with any municipality, when you introduce a urban infill site, there's going to be some additional traffic. But I would imagine this is where, the city wants to expand people living. And so I totally appreciate that. I think we would, again, just be advocates of trying to reopen Lake Wire Drive.
Yeah, if you could reopen Lake Wire Drive, that would be, everything would be great then.
Yeah.
But right now,
it's a little bit beyond the scope of this specific project and us, though. So I think that's a good conversation. I think that's a good conversation, especially for when we're talking about West Downtown planning. But I think that's that's a bigger piece of the puzzle.
It's definitely something we are thinking about, and we're actively working with the city to try and figure out how do we get ahead of this before this thing goes to occupancy.
How about this? So I'd love to hear about how you guys came to the place of having this development project. What was attractive about this site to you? What you feel like the market conditions are, and specifically why the request?
Sure. So I would say the interest in the site probably started about 5 years ago in this room. We were doing we had just stepped into the Lakeland market, and it was, honestly, I told Zach today, this is his first time coming down from Atlanta, visiting Lakeland, and when we got into the neighborhoods, it's like you're in this gym that is so unrealized, and we went back as a group and we did a historic project here that we had to go through the historic board for approval, and that's where we kind of said to ourselves, we're set on finding a site in Lakeland. And so there was a failed development, well, not necessarily failed, but a development that never came off the ground that was originally this L-shaped parcel here going this way from a group out of Miami. I'm not sure why they didn't complete it. We immediately got that site under contract and then approached the owner of the Lake Wire retirement facility to acquire that additional piece of land. I think why that site, we have an unbelievable view. If you take all of the units that are facing south, they all get a complete view of Lake Wire, and that's a huge selling point that you just don't get really anywhere else with any of the products that are currently here in Lakeland. We would compare ourselves to Meriton. I honestly think we will build a better product than what they did. And if you look at where a lot of their units face, they don't have this. This is just something you don't get in a lot of sites. And then, talking about Jason's other project in Bonnet Springs, that is a walkable site from where we are. And so we really saw this as the kind of catalyst to creating walkability all the way from, call it, where the joinery is, where the parks are, just to the south of that, all the way across to Bonnet Springs Park. And this will create that, connectivity between all of that. So then we started thinking about, okay, we're on a very tight site here. I mean, we've got 1.5 acres, but we have huge density that we want to take advantage of. And so then it became, how do we maximize parking and also maximize units? And so we then saw this as like, well, we're really creating kind of the first true urban infill product in the city of Lakeland. I mean, if you go to the other sites, they're all surface parked. And with that, then comes a huge additional cost, and that is the parking garage. And that parking garage is going to pencil out at somewhere around $1 million when it's all said and done.
How many spots?
103, I believe, is the total. And so we were actually able to get creative with it, where we have 2 levels that are both on grade. We use the slope, which did minimize the cost some there. But going into some of the other aspects that that are unique to the site that do involve additional cost. One is 3-phase power. We need that for this closed corridor building. And again, I think that's another aspect that most projects here in Lakeland don't have, because we need this elevator for the 3-phase power. So the 3-phase power now is located, I believe, on the northwest corner of George Jenkins and MLK. We are going to have to pay to pull that 3-phase power across the street and then down to the east to our site. Other products, other developments are going to be the benefactor of that. And we have another development that's going in next to us, and whether we haven't gotten much clarity on whether or not they'll need it, they're probably going to use it. And so because we're first in line, it just is what it is. We have to pay for it, but there's going to be other people that benefit.
What's the cost of that run?
We don't know yet. Okay. We're still working with Lakeland Electric to figure out what that final cost is going to be. So that we also have all the utilities that will be vacated from the alley. These are dated utility lines that we're going to have to redo. We're also going to have to set up temporary power to continue power and other utilities. I think Spectrum and Charter. I can't remember who the cable and internet providers are, but they're all in agreement of allowing us to vacate that alley, which means removing their utility lines from there, but we have to then go pay for temporary lines to be run while we're doing this project. But again, we're going to create better infrastructure surrounding this, and naturally, I think that neighborhood is only going to continue to get better and only going to continue to see new ground-up development, especially when a product like this goes up. So, we're not the first ground-up development in the city of Lakeland, but we see this as kind of the first on that side of downtown, on the multifamily side, and we see some benefit that's going to be going to other developers that come in behind us. The other thing that we have to do on this site that's costly is underground retention. The only way that we could get away with doing this much density, having a parking garage, was finding somewhere on site to put that water, and it's got to go underneath. And so, do you remember what the costs were?
For the underground?
Yeah.
We don't have the final cost of it.
Yeah, I mean, we're putting in big numbers for that. But again, if we weren't dead set on the site and what we're doing, we wouldn't continue to push this. And we really see this as kind of the first, like I said, urban infill site that's been produced in the city of Lakeland. If you want to scroll down to the next, real quick. This is the view from the southwest corner. So this is where you're going to approach from. This is going to be where our leasing office is for prospective tenants. That will also be the entry that goes into our clubhouse area directly into the center courtyard, which is where our pool will be located. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the site plan of where that pool is going to be located. Within the pool, we're going to have outdoor grill system for all the tenants. We're going to have the clubhouse. I think it's maybe on the next page. I can't tell if it's on that one.
Landscape plan?
Yeah, so this is our landscape plan, but basically I'll just go ahead and point. So our clubhouse and gym area will be out here overlooking into the pool. There'll be areas for people that want to work from home to be able to do so by the leasing office. Clubhouse that has, pool table activities for tenants to do, areas for people that want to set up, small private parties, and then a full gym area for tenants to be able to utilize. So we kind of are trying to create a fully amenitized place where tenants can literally not have to leave. They can do everything from morning to evening, all in one place.
So the range of the unit sizes are averaging 864 square feet, but you're going to offer 1 to 2 bedroom sizes, and these are intended to be market rate.
Yes.
None of them are going to be any affordable or workforce housing type units. These are all market rate.
Correct.
Okay.
And our intent as the developer is to hold this. This is not a development that we plan to sell.
What's your portfolio look? What does your portfolio look like right now?
So currently we have under ownership and management about 60 million worth of property and we also have another 300 unit project that we're working on in downtown Fort Myers, which is a little bit difficult now. But we also have a mix of multifamily and commercial retail.
Okay.
And the reason why we have brought them in is because Impact has done over $12 billion worth of ground-up projects.
Okay.
They're the ones that are making the decisions on how things need to be done. They're advising us every step of the way. So all of the vendors that we have partnered with have been under the advisement of Impact. So Rada Langen, who is a very large national civil engineer, Charlene Brock, who has designed probably, 10,000 units throughout the state of Florida. So we have built a very, very robust, experienced team that that I have no doubt is going to do an absolutely excellent job getting this project done.
You said market rate, so you're basically competitive rate with what Muriton is currently.
Correct.
You consider
Correct.
Muriton
Muriton, Nobe. I would say really those are the only two right now that are located in the central downtown area that we would compare with.
Plus the new complex on the west side.
On the west side, yeah. But they're probably going to be quite a bit behind us in terms of coming to market. Just naturally, this is only, I know our time frame said fall of 2024. We see the construction as 18 to 20 months. Hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn here with our GC behind me, but that's really about where we see it time frame wise taking. And we're fully capitalized too from an equity raise standpoint. We are in permit review right now. We've already gotten comments back, so we're very close. This project is a full go, and so along with some of the additional costs that weren't planned at the beginning, we're also operating in one of the most volatile economic environments possible. I mean, our pro formas over the last 4 months have been absolutely killed. I mean, there's no way around it. Coming to you guys asking for this request was not even in the cards as of 4 months ago. But the viability of the project has gotten a bit questionable just because of what the Fed has done over the last 4 to 6 months. And we do see construction costs continuing to go up going into 2023, which is when we're going to be breaking ground. So. And then I guess if you go back one of the things that we've done here, obviously we have a parking garage. It's going to be facing George Jenkins Boulevard. We actually created this landscape buffer with the city of Lakeland. We really tried to bring down the significance of the view of a parking garage. And so this is kind of a 3-layered landscaping buffer with large trees that are located on right up against, and then 2 layers of shrubs that are going to be, and then there will be some small area that we're probably going to create as a dog walk for tenants to be able to utilize.
Hey, Brian, remind me, how many units was Meriton?
315.
Okay. And
305, excuse me.
305. And how many acres?
10.
10. Okay. So this is significantly more dense. So like almost double. Close to it. Okay.
Brian, maybe you can answer this question, but I like the project, considering the close proximity to, again, Lawton Childs and what we just went through on Lake Miriam, Lakeland Highlands. Do you think we'll face, you don't have a neighborhood in the same proximity as you had on Lake Miriam, but you still have the school there. Like bumping right up to it. So are there any consequences dealing with Polk County Public Schools or parents of those students going there? Is this something that may come up later?
Well, Chuck is probably a lot closer to the concurrency considerations that came or will come with site plan approval. Unlike Lake Miriam, this one doesn't require any legislative action of the City Commission.
Okay.
So the potential conflicts with the school are real and will need to be addressed between the staff, the school, and the developer. But they've got the right to do what they're proposing to do. So we're here to talk TIF request. The question about reopening Lake Wire Drive is one that we are continuing to have. That'll ultimately be a decision of the commission. Funding it will be another question, and how quickly we could do that over a period of years, probably. So there are a lot of moving parts. Chuck, if you want to talk school concurrency at all?
Sure. I'll just say that, this development has gone through the site plan review process, and there are no issues from a school concurrency, utility standpoint, traffic standpoint. We understand the issues with the school, but it's really not unlike we have across the street with McKeel Academy and No Bay, Meriton, and the development activity over there as well. We just asked, there is a change for the parents that are picking up and dropping off the students and that use Magnolia, Peachtree on a daily basis, and we ask for patience of them while we figure out the longer-term plan of how we handle the east side of Lake Wire and Lake Wire Drive itself. I know personally, what you said is exactly, I know what I've been thinking for years is that we need to reopen Lake Wire Drive. That is and was an important part of our collector road system in the downtown area. That's going to involve, certainly decisions by the commission and a lot of coordination with the school district. That was back when Freedom Park was going to be a much bigger park than what it is today. And so there were some other kind of synergies that were planned with the school back, 2006, 7, and 8. That are probably not quite the same as today. So we would need to look at that. We would need to work with the school district about, how do you handle the bus pickup and drop off because of where the bus loop is located. There's a lot that we would need to work through. But ultimately, this is the right development in the right location in the downtown area. It furthers the goals of getting more multifamily inventory in the downtown core. We have to work with the school. There are different ways we can handle that. Lake Wire Drive is part of that mix, and we will have those conversations going forward. But those are things that we've been talking about and had worked through the site plan approval process, and I don't see any issues that are a problem for this development going forward.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Brian or Valerie, can you just, for context, give us a reminder of some of the recent TIF agreements that we have approved? Because I think we remember that we have gone above the standard, but there have been different levels for different projects. And so that may be helpful as we look at this request.
Do you know?
Well, I know some, but I think you might be more fluent in reviewing those.
The most recent one's, of course, Oak Street, which is a CRA-owned property that the CRA and the commission awarded an agreement or entered an agreement with Onyx to put 200 multifamily units, structured parking underneath, including 100 replaced public parking spaces that are currently on that site. You did 80% for the first 5 years and 60% for the second 5 years. I say you and the commission. The only other deviation in the recent past was for the Florida Tile site, the Lake Wire Development Phase 1, 300 units, Chuck?
Yes.
And 15,000 square feet of retail. They requested, identical to this request, 75% for 10 years. The advisory board and the commission approved 75% for the first 5 years and 50% for an additional 5 years. There have been 3, if not 4, other smaller multifamily projects, Orange Street, Lemon Street. There is one on Lime. Maybe we did do a TIF agreement. All of those were standard 50% 5 years.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So if I can add, TIF agreements are meant to offer one tool for you all to consider in incentivizing redevelopment. It's not the only tool at your disposal. So Greg was reviewing some of the infrastructure costs that impact not only his development, but future development. So our tool that can be used is how to assist with those types of infrastructure costs. And what our teammates here just discussed was the reconnection of Lake Wire and some of the impacts that may be associated with that. So those are other types of resources that we can use to help assist not only their development, but the future connections that need to occur. So it isn't just a straight TIF agreement. This is a reimbursement back to a developer after their significant expense of redeveloping land of property taxes. So that's just one tool at your disposal. This is the request that's before you. It's certainly your discretion to consider beyond the scope of what is standard, but staff is recommending the standard, 50% at 5 years. And unless there's further discussion or questions, we're all here to help answer that.
I guess one just for the developer, how did you guys back into the request, versus going 75% for all 10?
We've looked at other requests,
Right.
specifically our neighbors on Lake Wire.
Yeah.
We wanted to basically just try and we didn't know what was approved for them. We just knew what was requested. And so we wanted to be on par with other developers that were doing projects in the neighborhood.
When you looked at that, did you look at what their other costs have been in comparison to what your costs were to measure their request versus and their investment?
We did. Unfortunately, we don't have exact numbers. I looked through their letter. It's pretty high level. So as a percentage of their project, I don't know what their additional costs were. So it's hard to compare, apples to apples when you don't have a full disclosure of what it is that I believe it was a remediation cost that they were being reimbursed for. So I don't know what those costs were. It was more based on, what they were requesting and term-wise.
I'd like to ask a
Yes.
question. Valerie, of the other tools that we have at our disposal, should we kind of go with your recommendation? They mentioned the three-phase power, underground retention, and the cost for the temporary power. Do we have any tools in our tool chest that we would be able to use to help them offset those costs instead of the tax reimbursement?
We would need to get further along in their development review process to be able to evaluate those costs. And then I would recommend that they would benefit not only their development, but others as well. That's why Lake Wire would be something I would recommend us pursuing. Three-phase power would certainly benefit their development and others, because it would be extending it to that location and then be available for the future connections. We're just not far enough along, I don't think, to understand what those costs are and what the engineering implications are, because I don't know that Lakeville Electric is fully engaged, or at least designed in that.
So there are opportunities for that discussion down the way, considering if we do not approve their request as requested.
Certainly.
Okay.
Teresa, do you have any thoughts?
No, I'll go with the recommendation of the staff.
Mr. Bryant? Yeah.
I go to recommendation.
Put a motion on the floor to recommend the bid.
Okay, we got a motion. Do a second.
I'll make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the staff.
That was his.
Yeah, I made the motion, so we just need a second.
So you're seconding his
I'm
motion?
seconding it, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
All right, so let's go into discussion then. I feel that this is, I feel like there's more going on with this project than what we typically see in these infill developments. When we talk about specifically the infrastructure elements they have to involve to get to 84 units on 1.6 acres is significant. The undergrounding of the retention, and the parking garage. How many spaces is the parking garage going to be?
103.
103 parking spaces?
That's right.
Okay, so that is a lot of density in an area that we would like to see density modeled. Meaning we would like to see in these types of properties, this type of development throughout properties in the CRA and beyond the CRA in Lakeland. I think there's validity in them asking for more than the standard. I'm not saying that, I think we should do 1.3 million in TIF, but this is not a three-story stick-built, surface parking lot project. This is certainly a higher level of quality than development that we've seen. So I think it's worthwhile that we consider something a little bit higher than 50% over 5 years.
To your point, the other project that I get the names, the Florida Tile project.
Yeah.
Are there other opportunities that we might expect these other tools to be used to help offset their costs? Or is this the first time we would be looking at a project where we would be able to channel money for specific things that would help them with that offset?
I think it's a question for Valerie and Brian. So,
I think understanding each project and the nuances of what it is, what are the challenges they are facing in getting the acquisition, understanding the challenges of a site, understanding the product they're developing, and then understanding what it is that we're committing to long-term with TIF. I haven't had the opportunity to sit down with all of you and show you your impacts of commitments yet. So I would rather share what we can spend one time as an infrastructure investment than commit continuously with TIF agreements, because these are commitments that we estimate based on assessed or anticipated tax revenue or taxes that will be paid on potential development and valuations. So as an example, we've talked about this at a team level. Meriton, we estimated, would be approximately 46 million after development. It's actually come in at about 53 million. So those taxes are a little bit higher. They're going to pay that. They're going to get a reimbursement of that. That impact affects the downtown CRA budget for a period of time. And that affects our ability to then help future developments. So that's something I think we all need to keep in mind as we look at future development and how we want to encourage it to continue to come to our community. We want to encourage infill development. We want to encourage it. Do we continue to just give it reimbursement on taxes, or do we help it invest in its own infrastructure so it can continue to grow? By helping this project with its infrastructure, and then helping another project with its infrastructure, and another project with its infrastructure, because that's only going to help all projects continue to flourish. So I don't know if that answered your question specifically, but we have other tools and resources at our disposal.
Just clarification, can a project request TIF and, infrastructure assistance?
I think that is
Later?
something we, as board, need to discuss, which I wanted to wait till the end of this meeting to talk about our retreat. But because this came in, we need to evaluate this request at this time. I'm still firmly holding at a staff recommendation of 50% 5 years, and let me have the opportunity to work with this applicant, work with their project to understand their needs, and come back to you with, something that may be necessary for not only their needs, but future needs of this area.
So you're saying we can approve the request as is and then down the road possibly look at a modification?
Look at something that will not just help them, but others.
So it would not be redoing a TIF. It would be.
No, you would recommend as is, and then this would go forward to commission as is. Or
Wave down and get a,
I'm sorry.
What happens when you sit on the
so
floor?
I agree with you, Brandon, on the validity of the request that goes beyond our standard. I think there is something to be said for the climate, the environment of building and trying to get a successful project off the ground, and we want to see that. And I rode by the site yesterday afternoon and looking at what's there today versus what they envision, it's in our interest to see that come to fruition. And if we can go beyond the standard 50%, and I know that opens up other developers come in and making the same request. I'm curious, Valerie, your point on if we just approve the standard and then there's other opportunities. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but I would be curious to hear from the developer on, I just want to make sure that we do all we can to support the project. And I'm not getting the taxes that we're getting now versus what we will benefit in the future, but that's significant, and we've talked about that in other projects, and so, so I don't know.
I want to interrupt you just for a brief comment. When they said they saw what we offered to the Lake Wire project, and that influenced them coming to us, I saw that, I feel that's a very, very good thing. Our job here as the Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Board is to support redevelopment and to spur redevelopment. So to have developers seeing what we did and say, hey, that's good, we want that too. I'd rather people come to us and we craft it to be what is appropriate for a project than for developers to not come. Because if developers are not coming, that means we're not doing our job. We're not meeting our goals. So I want to keep that perspective. I'd like us to try to maintain that perspective here of our purpose as the Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Board is to spur economic development or redevelopment in our 3 districts. And this project is in line with those goals. So as I know if there's trepidation about kind of the scale of something and the magnitude of that, I totally understand it, but I'd like us to remain anchored in what our mission and what our purpose is as we review these. I'd rather be in a position of us telling developers no, because they came to us because they saw us do something good on a project, on a different project, and they came and made a request to us, rather than us not being told no by not having opportunity. So I think that's an extremely important thing to keep in mind, especially as the market in the development world gets a little bit more dicey with financing and with interest rates. It's important for our purpose and our mission and long-term development in Lakeland that we continue to have these opportunities come to us. So keep that in mind, that it's a very good thing that they saw what we did and were excited about it enough to come to us. So that's a very good thing. So this is long.
Question
Yeah.
for the developer. Are the first 5 years the most important? I've heard that with previous projects when we have come back with maybe a revised arrangement from what they requested. I'm just curious if that is most important compared to years 6 through 10, or not necessarily.
So I think it's really dependent on our inflationary environment. I'd like to say yes, but at the same time, it's really going to be dependent on what happens in the next 5 years with inflation. I would assume inflation continues for the next at least 3 to 4 years, and so it is really important early on. It also is dependent on, where market rents are, and I could not point to like a specific time period of where it's more important. It was more geared towards the total amount of additional costs that we were looking at and trying to negate those costs through 10 years of tax reimbursements. And I think we're pretty close on that number when you look at that 1.2. I think that's probably actually lower than what we have. I mean, just the parking garage alone is at $1 million. The underground retention is, Jason may know rough numbers, but it's going to be pushing well over 6 figures. So those are 2 of the 4 items off the bat are already putting us at the threshold that we're at. I think it was really the goal was to try and negate the additional costs that we didn't see 12 months ago. And then now that we're in this interest rate environment, being able to keep, our investment group happy to make sure that this project still got off the ground. And again, I think another thing that's really important to keep in mind when a lot of developers are going in and they are selling their project immediately. So it doesn't matter to them whether it's the first 5 years or 10 years. Our interest here is to hold this product. That's what we want to do, and that's why we came with this request, because we want to hold this product for at least 10 years, and so that keeps us in line, for those 10 years. Because if we aren't hitting our investment numbers on a cash flow basis, we do have to go find other projects to be able to replace that cash flow that we're not getting. And so it will become, if it's only a standard request at 5 years, do we then have to sell this product and try and find another investment? I wish I could predict that now, but I can't. But it's much easier to hold on to a product than it is to try and sell one and then have to find a replacement. And it's even harder to find one in a location like this.
To be clear, from my understanding, the reason for the additional request is because of those 3 areas that are going to incur additional costs that you were not expecting. So if there were opportunities to offset those costs in other ways, there would still be a win here. Like there wouldn't.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. I think we talked to Jason about this. This was kind of the first opportunity that we saw. And so we kind of put our application in immediately. If there are other opportunities, we're obviously open to seeking those, especially if that's going to be an easier, less burden on the city. By all means, it all goes into one final bucket. And so wherever we can get that from, we're more than happy to go through. If it requires another application, more meetings, it really doesn't matter to us. Yep. Just, at the end of the day, whatever's going to be easiest for you guys to approve and the easier process and maybe not setting precedent for getting too much for future developers, we're all on board for any avenue, so.
I'm with you, Brandon, on the fact that I feel the nature of the project and the direction that I'm wanting to see development go, something different than our standard, but I don't know that I'm comfortable with what's been requested. So
Yeah.
I might be willing to suggest that we discuss maybe the 75 for the first 5 and 50 or less than that for the additional 5. That's kind of where my head is going and after the discussion.
I would agree as well. I guess my only caveat would be is, if we go that extra step today, then, future requests for additional infrastructure help, wouldn't, I guess, be available. So I wouldn't want to go above and beyond the standard and then, exactly, 5 months from now, come back.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And I mean, honestly, timeline-wise, I don't think they have 5 months. It seems like if they're coming back, it's going to be in our November meeting to hit their targets, But if I'm on board with that, Frank. Just say, hey, we could do, kind of.
I think just like we did in the previous Florida Tile property, 75 and 50, I think is appropriate, especially for, what this project brings. But at the same time, I hate going against Valerie's recommendation that, hey, she has something in place that may be better. But again, at the end of the day, as the developer, I don't want them to leave here, with the unknown. And so.
Can I maybe make a suggestion?
Sure.
If you were to present to us an alternative that is in a middle ground, but maybe caveated with like, hey, this is it. Like, you can't come back to us for infrastructure help. I think I can take that back to our group internally and say, hey, they fought for us here, but we can't go back to them, again and say, well, we need more money again. Like, that's just not. Maybe that's part of the agreement. Just trying to think outside the box here, but.
Yeah. Good.
I'm uncomfortable with 10 years. I don't see this as the same kind of project as what we looked at with Florida Tile. I don't know if anybody else listened to the city commission meeting when I was really interested after we struggled that last time to see how the commission, I don't think you were there, Chad.
The one meeting I missed in 2.5 years.
I was really interested in knowing how much we had battled with this idea of going above the standard all the time. And I was interested that they struggled with it as well. And there was a few commissioners that were having heartburn with the idea of it. It just seemed to be a bigger ask. But at the end of the day, they did get to where we had recommended it. I sat here, I was looking at the numbers, and to me, if we did 5 years, 75%, so we give them a little bit more, that we recognize these other costs and what it will bring, and I agree, this is a great project and a great opportunity. I would be more comfortable with that and still leaving the door open for looking at ways that we can help. It makes more sense to me to be very proactive on the things that help. Your point that 3-phase is going to help some other areas, and finding those opportunities that will help the area grow, that to me seems to fit more with what we're about. So we give them a little bit more than we would normally do, and then say, hey, let's keep working to figure out how to help you in this.
So you're thinking like 75% in 5 years and leave the door open?
And leave the door open.
Yeah, I kind of like that. What about everyone else?
I like it.
Yeah, I think it accomplishes the same thing, just cut it a little differently.
Yeah. And I don't think I've ever gone really against staff recommendations, and I don't want you to take that personal here.
Go for it.
Especially the first thing.
Don't worry, we got board retreat, we'll work it all out.
Round table. Can I ask, Valerie, why the staff recommends 50%?
Because it gives us more flexibility to work on these other issues up front.
Right.
And so we could, And I just haven't had the opportunity to work
Yeah.
through some of their initial
I think that's kind of like what the feeling is
development
here.
concerns, so that I wanted to be able to have that.
I think
opportunity.
we're sensing that there hasn't been the opportunity for you, like, I mean, you're
A couple weeks in.
a couple weeks in. Yeah, and so,
I wanted to be able to work through that. I think this incentive is here for any type of development to come in and say, hey, we moved into a redevelopment area. I'd like the opportunity to receive the benefit of TIF. But I understand the value and I recognize the benefit of this particular project. There are planning documents that our downtown CRA had identified this specific site for residential infill.
yeah.
So I know that we, as a CRA board and the city overall, wants to see this happen. So I recognize the importance, and I'm not minimizing the importance of this project, and I see the value of every point that has been made. So I wanted to be able to have the opportunity to come back with some other alternative resources. But if that's the recommendation of the board, we can.
Thank you. Kate, I like your recommendation. I would be curious to hear from the developer, is that on your part, 75% for 5 years, and then continuing to look at some other options?
Definitely. I think that's fair, and like I said, at the end of the day, it's, from our perspective, it's all going towards the same goal of trying to reduce our costs, whether that's on the front end or on the back end and the rebates on property taxes. So I think, we see a benefit both ways. We're happy to work through some alternative solutions to see if there's a benefit there. I think that's more than fair.
Okay.
So I need to rescind my motion.
It's up to you.
You can either rescind the motion, or the second would also need to rescind, or you could call it for a vote, and if it fails, then
Okay.
you can get another motion.
I think it'd be.
To save double voting, I'll just rescind my motion.
And I rescind my second.
All right, so we're back to the question. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we move to approve 75% for 5 years and discuss other options after that.
Okay, so,
And I'll second that.
all right, wonderful. Any further discussion? Any further questions? Seeing none? All right, as a priority for me, to make sure that we're having really good consensus going, I want to make sure I hear from everyone. So I want to just kind of go around one last time. So, Kate, you've spoken. Mr. Bryant, we haven't really heard from you.
Yes, I think the project is well represented, and I think we need to go ahead with the approval.
All right, wonderful. Teresa?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like with the validity, like, when you said that, I agree. I do get nervous about November's meeting. Every meeting, as we grow, we are going to grow. Lakeland, they know. We are a hot spot. We are there's going to be more developers coming. We're going to grow. We're going to hopefully be given lots of opportunities. So I'm cautious, but I'm supportive. So yes.
Okay. All right. No further discussion. We'll take to a vote. All in favor? The motion on the table is to approve a 75% TIF agreement each year for 5 years, and also allow staff to continue to work with the developer and come back to us with potentially other incentives. So all in favor? Aye? Aye. Any opposed, like sign? I can see none. That motion passes. So guys, thank you so much for coming to us. It's a beautiful project. I'm excited to see what y'all do. And I'm excited to see what you and Valerie and her staff are able to put together. But it's something that it is very much in line with what we've talked about. What we want to see downtown happen. Your 84 units with a garage on 1.6 acres is incredible. It really is. So thank you for coming to us. And hope you find a lot of success in this and find some more property to develop.
Definitely. We really appreciate the time today. We share the same feeling. We're absolutely bullish on this project. we share all the same feelings about the city of Lakeland, the kind of drivers behind the economic development and the people sitting in this room that have really pushed this. So we appreciate everything that your group has done, and we look forward to continue working with you, and hopefully this will be the first of many projects.
Speaking of economic development, it's not a bad place to have a company located either, so. Traffic and.
Or a house and a family.
Yeah, so, just keep that in mind. All right, guys, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Just one comment.
Yes, sir.
You guys understand there's a historical component where you're putting that
We do.
that complex?
The Buffalo Soldier site, yes. So we, as we get into the kind of fit and finish part of it, that's definitely something that we're considering is how we can incorporate that. One of the things I didn't mention also was we are very big on trying to maybe take some of the onus on improving that area that's right in front of the lake there, even at our own cost, even though that may be city property, because we really see the advantages of kind of cleaning some of that up. And obviously that's, maintaining the memorial that's there. I think there's numerous memorials that go around that lake. And so we would like to kind of revitalize that, because obviously we want to maintain the history. It's also a benefit to our future tenants there. But yes, we are definitely keeping that in mind as we go forward, and are going to make our best attempt to incorporate that into the product.
Terry's your guy, so he's playing coy about it, but he's our foremost expert on those soldiers, and has a lot of good work in the community in keeping this story alive. So keep that in mind. He's your dude. He'll certainly be your resource. All right, next, our South Florida Avenue Master Plan update, page 19.
So I do want to allow for some time for discussion, but I want to just recap, hopefully briefly, some of the history up to today. So everyone is very familiar with this corridor, I hope. If not, I hope you become familiar, because it's a very important corridor to our community, especially Dixieland, and a gateway to our downtown. But for the past 18 months, the 1 mile Dixieland corridor of South Florida Avenue has been part of a lane reduction or road diet test. This new traffic pattern has been reduced from 2 lanes in each direction with a center lane down to 1 lane in each direction with the center lane remaining. The original 5 lanes were non-compliant. They did not meet today's standards. The 8.5 feet wide lanes were much narrower than the Florida DOT, or use the acronym, I'm sorry, Florida Department of Transportation 11-foot wide state road requirement. The typical tractor trailer today is 8.5 feet wide, so the narrow lanes left no margin of error and were unsafe. The reduced traffic pattern had been studied for effectiveness over the past 18 months by more than 90 sensors to see how the lane realignment impacted the 1 mile Dixieland corridor. There has been a very active public engagement effort from DOT and the city's communication team to ensure that the public has the opportunity to understand the test, its results, and engage with the local officials, which is us. So, this historical data of South Florida has been proven that its configuration was unsafe for many users. It is imperative that every corridor within our community can accommodate every type of travel: the car, truck, transit, pedestrian, and bicycle. So the strategic master plan process was completed in an effort to provide a clear roadmap and vision to show how South Florida Avenue can be permanently reconfigured with a lane reduction. There were originally 9 preliminary corridor options to show South Florida Avenue as a complete street. However, each come with a number of variables with significant pros and cons. AIRS will review its refined options as well as strategies for the success of this corridor in their presentation. Yes. So DOT conducted a survey using MetroQuest platform, which allows residents, or had allowed residents, to drop pins on a map and share specific suggestions or comments. The survey received 2,276 responses between June 1st and July 19th, and it allowed them to evaluate priorities, Also allowed them to provide feedback on the project and sharing their own personal experiences and give ideas on the interactive map through the site. Participants were identifying their top priorities, and what that included were driving improvements, traffic congestion management, pedestrian improvements, economic development, and beautification. There are mixed feelings about driver safety. While some appreciate the wider lanes, others felt drivers were more aggressive since the lane reduction. Congestion, merging, and turning onto South Florida Avenue have been some of the challenges for drivers. Most respondents did not walk the area, and they perceive that pedestrian traffic is generally very low. But those that do walk the area like the buffer between the cars and sidewalks, but they wanted more improvements, like wider sidewalks, or removing the existing obstacles that were blocking their path. Many comments were suggesting that alleyways were offering a better pedestrian environment than South Florida Avenue did. In addition to the online survey platform, the city and DOT co-hosted a large public forum at the RP Funding Center with about 118 participants in July. As we all know, there is a lot of public resentment, and the surveys identified that. It's about 1/3 positive and 2/3 negative. The biggest complaints were traffic congestion, speed, and the need for additional beautification. So, there will be a joint workshop in December with the Commission and DOT to further evaluate what these results mean and really dig deeper into what the survey, I'm sorry, why that popped up, what the survey revealed. But there was also the analysis that DOT did with all of those sensors that our traffic management team really dove deeper into, and I'm going to let Ayers and Chuck talk about that a little more. So this leads to the strategic master plan, which you, the CRA Advisory Board, will hear about today. The Advisory Board and the Commission, which is technically the CRA Board, contracted with Ayers Associates in March to create this vision about the corridor. I must say that all the previous planning, there's several plans out there about Dixieland, have been a major feat. It's no easy task to provide a simple solution for such a constrained corridor. It's not a simple task to make a decision that will affect so many people. And not a very popular decision to deal with such a constrained corridor that people think it should go back to 4 lanes. But there are intentional and mindful initiatives that can be taken to ensure the success and safety and resiliency of this corridor. This must be done in a collaborative approach with the city, DOT, business community, and the neighborhoods. But the strategic master plan has been done in tandem. It's not been done in a silo. This team, with the city, with DOT, and with a lot of our stakeholders, have worked together to create this document. These 2 documents, you've seen them. And I have to say that it's being done in a I'm losing my train of thought, I'm sorry. It's being done at the same time because the analysis and the studying of the road test can't be done and presented to the commission with just data and analysis. The commission also wants to see how can this road be implemented and be made successful after it's put into a permanent configuration. That's what this master plan is going to show. So it's going to be used as a tool for decision making. So I want to make sure that everyone understands this is not going to be used for a decision today. This is just an update for the contract work that Ayers has done. So I want to introduce Benoit Paniker and Mike with Ayers Associates. I'm going to turn it over to them for their presentation. We also have Chuck Barnby, who is our local expert on everything transportation and planning. And Brian Roos, of course, is with us along with Jason if there's any questions on just the process or the task authorizations. So Benoit, I will get your presentation up in just a minute.
Thank you. Is it okay if I send you?
Yes, that would be best. And everyone, thank you for letting me read through my notes because I didn't want to miss certain talking points.
I made some copies of the slides of.
Yes,
That's
we
not-
can.
Those are the
These-
reports, but
these-
these are just the slides. There's more than. Yeah, so this is the presentation. These are the reports.
That's the slides. It's a little easier to hit highlight.
Let's jump in.
We're good, Well, thank you for the opportunity to present, and thank you for the great opportunity to work on this exciting project. We've been involved with Brian and Chuck and the rest of the staff at the city. It's been a real exciting project, to say the least. So we started this project, so again, South Florida Avenue, and the next slide, please. So we were asked to slightly higher.
Give me a second, it's not.
Can go to page view, I think. We'll sort that out.
Thank you. Well,
Okay. Yeah, so we were approached by the city with a task order to specifically look at South Florida Avenue between Lime and Ariana Street in conjunction with the FDOT's road diet test. So we started the project looking not just the design options for the street concepts for the cross sections, but just look at it in its entirety and how can the city leverage all this public investment to benefit the city more in terms of economic redevelopment, urban design, put it all into context. So we were appointed in March. We started the project in April. It was a quick 14-week project, kind of aligned where we would end where the road diet test would end. And so all of these decisions, and you'd have enough information from the city's perspective while FDOT was doing their studies to look at all the opportunities that the corridor has. So that's the background to how we were appointed. So when we started looking at the project itself, we saw it more than just a street, and looking at the context of the whole city, we thought that we really need to see it as a district in itself, just as you see downtown, downtown west, all of it in the context of the historic Dixieland district. If we can actually look at it beyond a cross-section, beyond a street design. And so that's the perspective that we, even while we were discussing the scope, we said, let's look at it that way. How is all this investment going to benefit the community at large? How it's going to improve the overall quality of life or the urban experience? So that's the context of how we looked at the project. We looked at the different districts within the city. You know, there's an up-and-coming medical district there, regional shopping area, and then this is another special district. So let's brand it that way, or let's repurpose it and envision it, you know, all in that context. The next slide, please. So,
I'm sorry. Being my friend today.
yeah, so we looked at the project, this 14-week project consisted of 3 phases.
Full screen.
Does it work? Okay, hold the mouse. But then it's too large. Carlos?
That's why you have the handouts.
Yeah, thank you. The mouse is being extra finicky with.
All right.
All right, so we did this project in 3 phases. The first was really to assess the corridor. We looked at the land use, the zoning, the actual properties, understood the historic context of it, looked at all the citywide bikes and trail networks, and tried to make it all kind of talk to each other, the new BRT with on Bartow, all of that, and put it into context and not just focus on that solution. So then the second phase was based on all of these previous studies that Valerie mentioned, you know, looked at that in the DOT process, and then what we understood from the site and all that, put all of that together and identify some key unifying themes that have been coming across over the years and over the study of what the main issues are and what the main priorities are. And then finally, when we actually came up with a plan, we wanted to make sure that that plan has at least an aspirational timeline on, you know, peeling off specific projects and how we can get that done over a period of time. So After the study and after hearing and reviewing all these documents, the main plan really is an urban design plan, which includes the street plans as well. So in urban design, what we see this as contextual, land use, transportation, quality of life, some of the soft branding, and all of that put together. So in the urban design plan, it's documented in the reports, but I'll just mention some quick highlights. What we saw, this whole 1 mile stretch of corridor between Lime and Ariana, we could actually have the opportunity to kind of have 3 different character areas, if you would, based on the historic context and how the buildings and developments are. So the core of the corridor really would be between Frank Lloyd Wright and Palmetto, where the buildings are closer enough to the street. What we were thinking there is kind of fully push the pedestrian environment, have a more walkable environment, and what we propose in terms of the street design and the configurations would reflect that. So meaning you would have limited kind of turn lanes or no turn lanes in that particular section of 4 blocks. You'd have to go around the block and come there. And it's just a much more central core to that district. And then the other 2 districts the other 2 character areas were 1 and 3, which has a more fluid kind of turn lane movement, and you could have more property access from the front of the street itself. So generally, that's how we saw the urban kind of environment kind of shape out, not now, but when the improvements come through. We also were focusing on, one of our big findings was, let's not look at this corridor just by itself. The alleys and the surrounding network and connecting streets are as important. So we need to have that discussion, and we did discuss with the DOT when we met with them in July, that this is an integrated solution. We have to think about how we improve access to the corridors, the alleys, so that properties can be accessed from the back, and how does that become part of the whole scheme. We also looked at some of the classic urban design features, gateways, markers, special intersections that can capture the theme, leverage the design aspects of the corridor. We also, in the plan, looked at specific redevelopment sites. These are, again, aspirational, and the discussions need to be had with the private property owners. But we're actually seeing, if you look at it closely from the property appraiser, there are people assimilating sites. You can actually see common ownerships. One of the challenges really is this, it's highly parcelized, and assimilation is needed to do any kind of significant project. But you're seeing in the north end here, properties being brought up and assimilated in anticipation of some kind of proper public infrastructure improvement that could make viable redevelopments. So we identified 12, 13 areas that are potential redevelopment sites, and throughout our plan, we kind of allude to, obviously it's private property, but that's the next step, that the city can actually engage in some kind of discussion for the larger, benefit of the city. We also looked extensively at the greenways, the city-wide trail network plans, and it's part, it's been happening as we go along. And then tried to propose, you'll see some of these dotted lines, those are the existing and future connections. How can we get more activity in and through the corridor and make that recommendation on what those connections are? The other kind of interesting things we noticed was, there's no public space or no public street or plaza on the street. But we have Drain Park right here. It's an amazing amenity, if you would, that's available. So the tagline is, how can we bring Drain Park to South Florida Avenue? So the interesting fact here is this particular right-of-way is much, much more wider than your typical, than the other blocks. So can we, at a future time, we have some renderings that are showing that, enhance that into more of a, at certain times of the a pedestrian, or at least an enhanced corridor that walks, can get people, when these areas and properties are redeveloped as mixed-use housing projects, they can actually lead to that particular part. So we throw in a lot of these ideas that are actually quite tested, because we have with us a team of engineers and others that look at the practical side of things with the street configurations and utilities, possibilities, and the stormwater issues. So that in a nutshell is, there's a lot, I'm just summarizing all of the stuff that's in that plan, but Yeah, we looked at quite a bit of that. So all of that is captured in that urban design plan, but on the next slide, I will focus on the main task at hand, I guess, is really the optioneering for the cross-section, the street cross-section. So when we did phase one, we came up with all, different combinations of street cross-section options. So we have 10 of these, including the one-way, which, when we assess it, it's kind of difficult to propose a one-way because there's no convenient pair that's close enough. Usually one-ways come pretty close to each other, and so, but we just assessed it, it's there. But other than that, we had 9 viable options. So you'll see a combination of options where there are dedicated bike lanes. So this is dedicated bike lanes on both sides of the street. This option, for example, is having both directional bike lanes on one side of the street. We have an option where there's parking on the street, kind of like what the existing, it's only 8 feet wide. So the key point we got to remember in all of this is you're dealing with a finite space. At best, you're at 60 feet right away, building to build the actual public domain. And at its narrowest point, it's about 48 feet right around Palmetto. So if you think of it as a budget, we have to see how we allocate uses for different, like the travel lanes and the pedestrian sidewalks and the bike lanes. So this is finite, 60 feet at its best, 48 feet at its narrowed constricted area. So we just have to play with what we have. The fact is also that right before the road diet, the outer lanes were substandard. It was only 8.5 feet. So in the current day, it would not be a viable, safe, and approvable road width. So that's how we came up. We had multiple options, some dedicated transit lanes. Transit was also a big, a big consideration in our plans. So as Lakeland expands, we're talking about the BRT, the Bright Line connections there. We see this as an important transit connection connecting all these major amenities. If you put it in the context of the whole city, this is one corridor that connects all the employment areas, downtown, and major residential areas. So I think it would be remiss of our part not to actually even think of it. We don't need to do it right now, but at least make the provision of a public transit. So from those 9 and 10 options, which were presented at the July 11th meeting at the DOT, we had mixed opinions. 130 people showed up. We've actually met separately with the DOT and tried to have that discussion, Chuck and Brian and all of us collectively, numerous times at the Strategic Rail Conference as well, we had this chance to talk to them and try and get some consensus on where they see the road configuration, where we want to position ourselves as a city. So we then came down to the next slide, please. We came down to 4 options. So the first option, to back up a little bit, there were 4 kind of themes that were coming out from the public engagement, from all the previous plans. TPO has done a plan, the city has done planning exercise, DOT has done planning The main thing that came out really, if we peel it down to 3 or 4 things, it was safety, both pedestrian and vehicular safety. The second thing was an enhanced urban experience. So, what is it? We take pride in our area. Dixieland's there. The college is there. It's all of this. So why are those areas better than our area? So let's have a better urban experience. The third thing was really about connectivity, like mobility connectivity, connecting the city to the rest of the area. And the last thing was economic development. So those in kind of that order were the main themes, and we kind of kept it to that, focused on what we heard and what we've researched so far, and tried to prioritize. So we then came down to 4 options based on that. The first option was, obviously, we're trying to keep it to a 3-lane section. What that would do is give you a 12-foot wide sidewalk on both sides of the street. On this option, there was the bike lanes were on the sidewalk. So the second option, the same thing, but what we had was a shared lane where the bikes, cars, and buses all would be on that same lane. So two kind of similar, but dissimilar in operations, if you would. And then the next two options came down to same configuration, slightly narrowed sidewalk, but you have parking on the street. So a lot of comments came back that parking was not, the street was probably not the best for parking because of the way, for safety issues and all that. And the last option is probably more closest to the previous condition, the previous road diet conditions, in it that it's got 4 lanes. The previous condition probably had 5 lanes, but this would reduce your sidewalk significantly to 6 lanes. But what you had is 4 lanes, and then you'd have to wait at the intersections to turn. So these were the 4 options, and we actually illustrated it. And what you have on the top is the actual image of the existing condition, and then we superimpose the proposal over that, so you can actually compare that on what that change would be. And you can see some of the other urban design improvements with the enhancements on the intersection and all that. So, and the next slide, please. So, yeah, this is what I just explained, that these were the main priorities that came out recurring over the years as how do we, in order to make a decision, I guess, moving forward, how do we prioritize and what are the key aspects that we need to look at? And from our perspective, from a consulting perspective, we see that safe and enhanced urban experience, supporting the mobility networks, especially we talked about transit. How can we make a transit line or the viability of a future transit operations on the corridor? And then we talked about tactical urbanism. We talked a little bit of how can we make those quick wins in terms of street intersections being enhanced, making it more for branding purposes, incorporating markers, working with private developers, especially Waller Plaza, for example. They have a huge parking area in front. What's going on with the actual building inside? It's not fully utilized. So having those quick wins. And then finally, we talk about resilient redevelopment. We've identified a few sites, but those seem very promising and viable. And then in the last stage, we really outlined all of these actions. It's in the plan, and tied it to a timeline of how we see from other communities and other cities around the country and around the state into how, these are aspirational. I mean, these will all change, and this is just more kind of advisory to Valerie and her team on how we can actually see the projects kind of pan out over the years. So it's a 15-year, we do something called scenario planning. So in the first scenario, 0 to 3 years, it's really about the focusing on the corridor, the redesign of the corridor through FDOT, and some of the preparatory works on the city side, looking at the codes and how we make some recommendations on how some of the codes can be changed to, exclude, I guess, parking in certain areas, limit the parking requirements so that you can actually facilitate more buildings. And also the last thing would be, once the redesign is done, in the next phase, from 4 to 7 years, it's the actual construction of the road by DOT and the supporting construction activity that the city would undertake in partnership with DOT or others, with the alleys and the bikes and the other trails. And then the third scenario would be from 8 to 15, how when all these developments come through, how can we support them? So that in a nutshell it's all in detail in the plan. And in the last slide, we've kind of laid it out on a timeline. Again, this is really aspirational. So up to Q3 right now, the FDOT road diet test kind of officially ended in October. And then the city strategic master plan kind of aligned with that. We also ended we made these reports in August, so it was completed. So that the city is armed with enough information and considerations from their side to make a decision and have that discussion with DOT. Hopefully, some kind of direction. Chuck, you can help me with this. Make some decisions by this year or early next year. That's that blob there. And then we start off with the city initiatives in terms of the codes and partnerships. And the other thing we are talking internally as well, and to Brian, we've discussed the opportunity of finding grants and funding through the US DOT or other sources to help push this project forward. DOT obviously will have some funds, but in order for us to get it to the next level that we wanted to in the city, we should look at separate funding. So that's another activity that will happen as soon as the plan wraps up and a decision is made. Then the FDOT will hopefully, once the city decision is made, the FDOT will have to kind of go through the planning and design process, which would take a good 18 months. And then after that, construction, 3.5 years. So you're looking at, that's the timeline. And then at some point, this is all aspirational again, 2024, the city can start with the public infrastructure projects, improvements of the bike trails and other connections, and then private property redevelopment. I've spoken too long, but that's in a nutshell what we did in 14 weeks, but it's covered comprehensively in the two reports. And we're very excited, and Mike's here with me. He's a partner in my crime, but actually a whole team of engineers and landscape architects and planners put this together.
It's beautiful work, and I know it was challenging work to undertake, so certainly grateful for your time and your effort. Does anyone have any questions? There's nothing for us to make a decision on. There's no action items on this, but this was just really for our information. Yes?
In this decision time through 2023, does the road stay exactly the way it is today with the concrete barriers?
Yes, and part of why we've got the concrete barriers out there today is to buy time. Back when DOT was designing the test, that was a big part of the discussion is what creates the least amount of expenditure on the front end, buys us the most time, and really gives the public the best idea of what a three-lane cross-section how it would operate. So it's determined that the concrete is durable enough where, we can make decisions on whether we go from 5 to 3 or 5 to 4, whatever that decision is. Then what is the ultimate vision in terms of the sidewalks, the public realm between the streets and the fronts of the buildings? And so until we get to the point of the permanent cross-section, whatever it ends up being, we're probably going to end up having those concrete separators in place. And so that's where the decision of the commission of going between, what are the number of lanes, then what do the sidewalks and the other elements look like? It's going to lead into a design phase of, design the road, design the sidewalks. That's going to take probably a couple of years to do. We're going to find funding and working with DOT to fund the ultimate improvement. And so while that happens, we're really going to need to have the existing cross-section in place.
Are there any suggested things to help solve some of the issues that we have right at the moment, or do we have to live with them through 2023? 24.
I think some of the thing, and these are issues we've discussed with DOT, is that I think clearly the merge areas on the north and the south end of the corridor is, I would say, where we're getting most of our comments and complaints. Because especially if you're coming downtown southbound, past the Pole Theater, to the Live Street intersection, it is awkward. Because you've got multiple traffic signals, you've got people trying to figure out at what point they need to get into the inside lane. I think that has been probably the most confusing of the lot. Northbound, it's a lot cleaner, as you start approaching Ariana Street, but you're still at one lane at Ariana Street. And are there some other things that can be done there to maybe make that situation a lot better? So even while we're figuring out the ultimate vision for the corridor, there are things that can be done to improve the merge points. The other thing the DOT is very much aware of as well is the need to provide some additional breaks in traffic so that people come in and off the corridor easier than is certainly the case now. I think to some degree we have, in my mind, what is the Edgewood Drive, the Edgewood Drive effect, where you can get a lot of cars going north and southbound in the area, but if you're trying to pull out of a driveway or you're waiting in a side street, the experience for you is certainly not good. It's been about, okay, how much traffic can we get through on 3 lanes? And I think we're demonstrating that we can get quite a bit of traffic through on 3 lanes and only have a small amount of delay, relative to the rest of the corridor. Now we got to figure out how do we improve access to and from the side streets and the adjacent properties. Those are things we can work on as well, while the ultimate improvement is being designed and the funding is being accumulated for construction. So it's not an all or nothing scenario here. And the other thing, and this was something that Benoit talked about as well, is that we've got other improvements that we need to continue to focus on. We need to improve connections to Drain Park. We've received several comments about improving access across at the Hillcrest, Missouri, Hillcrest, New York Avenue intersections because of the business activity in that area, the park, the neighborhood. There's really kind of becoming a node there, and people are wanting those improvements. Those are things that we need to look at as a city. We need to look at, continue to look at Ariana Street. The city just installed a raised crosswalk on the other side of Dobbins Park, which will help look in. We've got 2 raised crosswalks down either side of the park, and that's going to slow traffic down, better manage traffic coming into the park area and by Dixieland Elementary. Do we need to do something similar on Missouri, New York? Do we need to look at traffic calming on South Boulevard between Frank Lloyd Wright and Lake Morton? So there's some things that we need to continue to look at on the city system. Again, parallel to, but not as a replacement to what we're talking about here. And so I think what you're asking, that sounds, it's not, we're going to wait 5 years to do anything. We're going to be doing other things, making adjustments, making tweaks to the system while we work on the design and fund the ultimate improvement.
Is a left turn signal going north onto Main Street in your awareness zone? One of the things, it's been kind of an unintended consequence of, because of the merge, people are lining up so much in the left lane to be able to be where they need to be, particularly in higher, denser traffic times, that we can't turn left onto West Main.
So if southbound where the merge is occurring, traffic is not allowed to make that left-hand turn. Today, there's a no left turn prohibition. Northbound, I don't think we've actually specifically talked about that location with DOT in terms of left turn phases. We've talked about Frank Lloyd Wright. Can we do something in Ariana? And do we do something in the southbound direction at Lime to handle those left-hand turns? And so those are standing requests we have of DOT. We haven't looked at.
Add that in there, particularly with what is coming and where West Main is going to become more and more of a factor. During the heavier traffic times, because of this merging thing, there's a great need that's developing.
To add to that, just not trying to rabbit hole you, Chuck, but I mentioned it last time, I don't know how to officially get it on record, but the left-hand turn going north at Orange is also, that's where there's been 15 accidents. And you haven't mentioned that, so I just wanted to, that's my corner, so whenever we hear a big boom, it's a little scary.
That's another location that DOT specifically, we're talking about with them because of the crashes. The other issue that we have, if you're heading westbound on Orange, because of the timing down at Lime, it's hard to sometimes make a left-hand turn to head south on Florida Avenue because of the proximity of those 2 intersections. So DOT definitely knows about that as well. So we have not forgotten about that issue. And so it's kind of, for that one, it's a twofer. It's crashes and being able to accommodate left-hand turns coming off of Orange onto Florida to head south.
As that merge is starting to be evident to the driver who's speeding up to get in front of the car on his left.
And it may be something, and this is something, that we've talked about internally, and we've talked about going as far as southbound, doing the lane drop at Pine before you even get into the downtown area. And that is something where you start to clean things up as you come into downtown. And this is another thing that hasn't really been talked about as much because it's outside the limits of this project, but how do you handle the Polk Theater and the narrow sidewalk, I tell people all the time, you can take 2 steps out of the Polk Theater and you're fine. The 3rd step, you're in the middle of Florida Avenue. I actually watched somebody the other day almost get hit standing there taking a picture of the marquee Saturday afternoon, and a car locked on their brakes and hit the horn, and the person in the street went, oh, sorry, and got back onto the sidewalk. So this is stuff that's happening all the time. You're hitting on some very key points here that we've also discussed with DOT. And so, we've got this corridor, and then how do we handle the transition in the downtown area and point south? But those are very important points.
Chuck, and to Chris Ann's point, the timing on those lights and then left turn signals and the amount of time that you have with those, if you have the left turn signals, because I've seen some place where the first 2 cars can get out and then the light's pretty much gone.
Right.
And that adds to the problem, because the 3rd or 4th car, just so they don't have to wait through another cycle, they're going to speed up. And that's where you end up getting your accidents.
And that's where exactly the left turn phases, it's a standing request for DOT. I wish they would have put a couple of them in. And there's some other issues that, can the mast arm poles hold the additional weights of the signal head? All kinds of other engineering things that I believe are the reasons why we haven't seen them to date. But having those left turn phases, at least at a couple locations, I think would be important in terms of being able to better handle the side street traffic and to provide, make people a little less anxious about, I've got to get through this light or else I'm going to be sitting here for another 3 minutes.
I mean, is that a consideration?
It is.
Okay.
It's absolutely a consideration.
When I looked at this, it reminds me of Hyde Park. What do you think? Is that, I know that's a huge comparison, but would it be like that? I mean, it seems like you're looking for more, it looks like in 15 years, we really wouldn't be driving that much to get to
Here's my big picture spiel.
Yeah.
When I first came to the city back in '01, kind of envisioning of what downtown Lakeland looked like at the time. Lakeland was just getting rid of the one-way pairs, and US Business 92 was just starting to get removed from around Lake Mirror. So downtown Lakeland was a very different place than what it is today, and the public was freaking out about what are going to be the impacts of taking these roads off and doing these things to the street system. Today, and so it was right about the time the Dixieland CRA was being studied and was being created. There was the finding of blight. The CRA was created. A big reason for the blight was Florida Avenue. And so as you started to move forward with what was happening downtown, okay, what do we do in Dixieland? Then we started to look at it in about 2003, then again in 2006, and then again about 2010 of, okay, Florida Avenue is 5 lanes, they're substandard, the sidewalks are substandard. Are there things that can be done? We looked at several different cross sections, options, median locations, taking out signals, adding signals, and nothing really seemed to solve the traffic issue, and nothing in the background was really seeming to create an additional sense of place for Dixieland. But we were seeing investment. People wanted to locate in Dixieland, and the neighborhoods also on either side were redeveloping, and there was also folks there saying, we want to go to businesses on foot, not have to get in a car and drive, and we wanted to have a sense of place. And so that's where we started getting into about 2014. DOT started to change some of their policies, because I think DOT was always willing to give us, they would be happy to give Florida Avenue to the city of Lakeland and say, you all deal with it. and as you might imagine, that's a budget buster for us. But in about 2014, the DOT started to come back and say, we're changing our philosophy as a state. And we're looking at making safer roads that are more appropriate for the surroundings. And having a 5-lane road through Florida Avenue may not be the best, through Dixieland and downtown may not be the best thing. So that's started this round of discussions. We've been at it again for almost 8 years, 9 years. And it has been about, maybe not to the same level as Hyde Park, but having something that is small business oriented, pedestrian oriented, bicycle oriented, neighborhood oriented, that is something maybe akin to Edgewater Drive in Orlando. And so that was why, AIR's visuals were something that were requested by the commission as being critical to paint that vision, because trying to get the public to think of Florida Avenue in a different light than what it is today it's a leap. But it's laid out, you got the block structure, you got the business, you've got most people, we've been contacted by like West Palm Beach going, we would absolutely love to have what you have here and do what you're doing here.
Well, I think your younger generation, which you're going to have in 15 years, so my kids are 16, I have 3 16-year-olds, they're going to love this. They want to live here, they want to walk, no one wants to drive, they all want electric bikes, and they want this life. And I really feel like that's what like we're offering. We can offer that to them. They want to be able to go to Lake Morton, to Lake Hollingsworth and walk, to make this path. And I see it in my kids. My kids walk every day from school around the lake. That's what they want to do. So I'm encouraged. I know I'm probably the minority, but I think that what we're offering and what...
I don't think you're the minority.
Okay, that's good.
I think that it's just, Chuck, I don't envy you in what you're having to do over a really long period of time, but you really are having to set the vision and stick to it and get the, and there are a lot of naysayers and negative Nancy's out there who are saying like, this is terrible, but it's not, and it's really necessary. I remember the first time I went to Polk Theater, and I was terrified. And then I remember the first time I went to when Born and Bred opened up in their new location, and at the time I'd been living in a loft off of Tennessee, and so I was used to waking up in the morning, taking my 3-year-old out or 2-year-old at the time out in a stroller and waiting in line. I did that for the first time at the new location, and I was like, I'm not going to die and have my son die for pastry, and so I left. So it's one of those things where this isn't done just to support one business.
Right.
This is done in order to support a lot of economic development that wants to happen in this area, and anyone who's on a sidewalk should be safe. Any sidewalk anywhere, someone who's standing there and using it and walking on it should be without fear of getting hit by a car, and that was not the case. It was flatly not the case, and I think when we get a lot of, when you do something different, there will be people who are just flat out against change. They're on, talk about the bell curve. You have your early adopters, and you probably know this a lot better than I do. So, but what are they called?
The laggards.
The laggards. There you go. So, and those types tend to be very vocal and loud. So I think it's good that you're saying like, hey, I like this. I know you're saying your kids are going to like it.
Well, I get it too, because I go down Success Avenue a lot, and I'm sure Success residents don't enjoy that, but
and it's funny, I live on Success, and when I
enjoy the drive.
We've lived there for over 16 years.
There you go.
And what I tell people is the traffic today is absolutely no worse than it was when we moved in 06.
There you go.
So, there are some newer folks.
Such an iconic street, too.
It slows me down.
It's, are there other streets where we need to look, and it gets back to kind of our obligation to kind of figure out how to handle parallel streets and some of those other ones that need traffic calming or some other enhancements. Absolutely, we need to be doing that. But in terms of diversion into the neighborhood, I don't think it's, if your lens is between 2020 and today, depending on when you moved into the neighborhood or how, the traffic has increased. But in that long spectrum of what has occurred over time, no, it's the streets function as they should.
I just have one point to add. So I did in 99, 2000, the Lakeland Midlands, Midtown CRA. I was part of the team that did that. So when we did the site visits at that time, there was much more blight. So our corridor here is not blighted by any means, meaning everything is ripe and ready for, I wouldn't say like a balanced, resilient economic development. And what we need to do, I guess, from this project is support it with, proper infrastructure, make that pedestrian space available, safety and all of that. So we work across the state, and a lot of our projects in Tampa, same context, but 5 years before, we transformed these corridors, Columbus Drive, 46th Street, near Armitage Works, all of those areas. We can see transformational activity happening. And just residents, even if it's not immense economic development, just people taking a sense of pride in that particular location and just experiencing, walking around and doing that. So this particular stretch is not blighted by any means if you compare it to other areas that we work in and we see other sites. So it's got all the ingredients to make it happen, really work, to be a nice district which is unique and real.
I envy what you're trying to do, and seeing that area from when I was a kid to what it is now, it's almost like you have this huge tube with all this water flowing, and then you're trying to flush it in, get it into a McDonald's straw because of all the growth south. And I just find it extremely difficult unless you use the side streets. For instance, you talk about success. If you're going southbound and you need, say, Quick Print, for example, there's no way in hell that you can make a left turn to get in there unless you go down the side street and come back up. That's just how the traffic flows.
Yeah.
So, and I've been in other cities that had that, and some of their solutions were that they used the side streets, maybe made them one way, but the population is growing to the south, and it's just, Florida Avenue is just a main thoroughfare.
Well, this is where like the Wabash extension is going to come in, because the growth is really in the southwest, and having that Wabash extension is going to make a huge difference, because all of a sudden, instead of all those new thousands of homes and stuff that are out off of Pipkin and Ewell and that, they're going to have an option to go north. That's in between County Line and in between Hardin. And that's really going to relieve some pressure on Florida, and to really be able to get it, to have a pretty, really from I-4 to, I don't know where it's going to end, that Wabash extension, but you're going to have a really nice corridor to move traffic.
Wabash is supposed to end where around Orient.
The northern terminus is at Fairbank Street, right?
Correct. What just finished, because the city just finished the extension of the north end, and then has improved the intersection at 92. The county's got a project down by Jesse Keene Elementary to just improve the two-lane section, to put sidewalks, trails down there. And then the southern extension, the big unfunded portion, the last portion is between Ariana and Hardin Boulevard, there behind Lakeside Village and Beaker Boulevard. So that's the last section of that whole 7-mile corridor.
And see, that's still west.
Right, but it's taking some pressure off. You're talking about like having a big tube. Well, part of that reason you have the big tube is because all that development going on in the southwest is funneling up through that way. So if you can have a pressure release valve further down the line, then you're going to have less that's having to go through. It's not the only thing, but there's a lot of little things like that.
We'll see.
And one of the other key priorities too is also getting Bartow Road improved over on the east side. Because that was the thing with the modeling, what the original master plan was, is Wabash and Sykes Boulevard on the west and Bartow Road on the east. About $28 million to 6-lane Bartow Road up to Commerce Point or the old AZ Park Drive intersection, and then improve the turn lanes, add a second turn lane at the the high school, do some other things to improve the capacity up to Main Street. That's a standing request. DOT's working on the design of that now, but we need them to program construction. And so that's been something I know the commission has had workshops with the district secretary about moving that forward. If we move that forward, that will also help this area because it's all about the network and handling both in the east and west side of the central city area.
And the BRT too.
The bus rapid transit, which is a longer term proposal, but certainly DOT is looking at putting buses on dedicated busways along 98 south of Lakeland towards Bartow, as well as between downtown and the interstate. And so they've done some feasibility studies. We're actually got a transit signal prioritization project that is scheduled for about a year from now, where the buses, if the bus is running behind schedule, the green time on 98 will be held to be able to allow the buses to go through quicker. And so there's some things like that, trying to set ourselves up for bus rapid transit. So there's a lot that's happening, but some of this is going to be a 20-year proposal, but we're chipping away at it bit by bit.
And it doesn't help right now with Pipkin at the end of Hardin, where people are not choosing that as an option to get north as an alternative. So that coordination didn't work very well, hopefully. We don't have any more of those situations as we keep going forward.
We can't wait for Pipkin to get reopened and get the network more back to normal down in that part of town.
I think to me, it just, for whatever it's worth, it boils down to, are we prioritizing speed and convenience over safety, or speed and convenience over economic opportunity for people? I mean, I just think about Hattie's Branches, which didn't work in that area because it was not a walkable space for people to get to. So you actually had to get in your car from downtown to drive to Hattie's Branches, another boutique, and find parking where they had like 4 parking spaces. And so I think, thinking of businesses that have closed or businesses that are needing to be open from a CRA perspective, I just think, whatever we can do to encourage, and I know I've had this conversation, I think, with Valerie and with Brian, and I feel like we're not in the minority. I think we're the silent majority. I think most people are in favor of this development and this progress. But because the squeaky wheel gets the grease, we're only hearing the negative, and we don't really have a place to go and share our opinions where we're not going to be lambasted, other than, we had the listening session. But if you go on social media and you hear all of the negative noise, there is not a space for the positive noise, because if I said, my office is on the corner and I'm still in favor of it, people are just going to call me weird or tell me I'm an idiot. So I prefer not to be told any of those things. I keep my mouth shut. But I think if we can continue to promote the opportunity that is ahead in the vision, I think that's definitely awesome.
If I may, that's a great segue, because ultimately, the commission hasn't made a decision, so we don't have a unanimous voice as a city to tell DOT this is a supported configuration. However, Historic Lakeland has written an endorsement letter. I know that there's several other boards and committees that are considering an endorsement of this configuration. I spoke with Julie. I think she's going to be bringing it to the board for the LDDA to consider that. So this is a very difficult decision for our commissioners, and I know that it's something that they have to weigh the interest of all users of this corridor, and they have to consider the long-term impacts. Chuck brought up a lot of history that I thought was funny when you were talking about 92 and just, what Lake Mary used to be and what it is now. If anybody remembers that, that's like, wow, what a blast from the past. So if you could go back in time and see what South Florida Avenue looked like before, what it looks like now, and if we could go forward in future and look at the decisions that are being made today, what would you tell yourself, your future self and your past self? So I think that's very powerful to remember some of the former plans and some of the things that Lakeland foresaw that could be changed. So the CRA has an opportunity. If you wanted to weigh in, you have an opportunity to do that, to make an endorsement or to make some type of public statement of support, and it's not required at all, but it certainly would help our commissioners to understand the position of this committee and this board.
And how do we do that?
Write a letter.
You can make a motion, and I would provide you with a draft.
Okay, the CRA would write the letter of endorsement. I see, okay.
If you feel strongly as a board.
I'd like to move to do that. I think that's a great idea. I don't know if anyone has quickly. Brian?
Well, just for discussion, so that there isn't an inference that were the board inclined to want to write a letter opposing the success of the
Thank you,
test,
Brian.
you would be free to do that.
Yes.
We are not only giving you the opportunity or invitation to support the project, sounds like several of you do, but so entirely the board's call. But Valerie's point about sort of the weight of the commission's decision, and they're going to have a workshop with the DOT on December the 2nd in the afternoon. Based on the feedback that we get from the commission at that workshop, we will follow that with a resolution that looks a lot like the resolution that a prior commission passed asking the DOT to conduct the pilot study, except this resolution will make clear the commission's position on the success of that test. And from there, the DOT will then have their marching orders, or at least the direction from the local government as to what they do. If the CRA was inclined to take a position, that at least helps to inform the balance of the commission in making that decision. There is no denying that there are 25,000 plus drivers and voters that travel through that corridor every day. So, there's a lot to consider, a lot to balance. To Mr. Coney's point about turning movements and signal timing, excellent points. And it really speaks to the need for the commission, the staff, to balance everyone's interests and everyone's needs, because any signal timing changes we make, any dedicated left turn arrows we add, guess what that does? It slows movement through the corridor, and that's been the big complaint, is that I can't get from Main Street to Edgewood in a reasonable amount of time.
Sure.
Yeah, that's growth, but making a recommendation as an organization, committee, wouldn't we have to decide on option 1, 2, 3, or 4?
I think just in general, we're saying we're supportive of
A change.
We're supportive of the work that AIRS is doing. We are on board with we view the test as a success, and we are going to be supportive of making it permanent. Whichever option is most reasonable. I don't think that's up for us to decide right now. But we would be supportive of making one of these options permanent. But we trust with the work that's been done. We believe this is a success, and we would like to see it become permanent.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
It's good to hear the different perspectives of this board. I think it's a good discussion, and Valerie, that was great context, introducing the presentation from AIRS, where this fits into the overall process, and we talked about that yesterday, so thank you for setting that up, and I think that's good to be reminded how this is part of all of it. Chuck, it's great to hear the history, and again, just to be reminded where we've been and where, your team, where you're trying to go. And I would encourage this board, whatever you feel is best, whether to weigh in or not, I will abstain from that vote, simply because I will be part of that decision-making process with the entire commission after the workshop. And so I encourage you to do what you feel is best, but I will sit out on the vote for the advisory board.
Okay, I understand that. I think that's a respectful thing to do there. So I kind of in light of what Teresa said, Christina, what you've said, the negative voices are very loud in this, and I think it would be very meaningful for us to make a statement of support and endorse the work that AIRS is doing. So we do have a motion in a second. Frank, do you have any comment on this?
No, I think I support exactly what they have, presented. I think something needs to change, and I agree that I think it's more the silent majority than,
All right. Teresa,
Yeah, I'm in favor.
is this something you're comfortable doing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just give Terry.
Sorry, Terry. What I'm trying to do, I didn't mean to skip you.
Sorry.
But just to give context, what I'm trying to do is like my natural instinct when running a meeting is like, I want to do it as quick as possible.
And Valerie, all of our meetings go long.
Well, you know what, they have been going long.
They don't always.
But
Sometimes they don't have to
most
do
of
it
the
all.
time, when
Well,
I've
we
been
like to
chair,
discuss.
they've been pretty darn brisk, and I'm very proud of that. But what that means is that we don't hear from everyone. And I think, for the good of the board, I want to make sure before we make decisions, we hear from everyone, even if it's just like I don't have anything to say. I want to make sure everyone gets the microphone
Gotcha.
for a second. So I wasn't meaning to skip you. It's you've spoken, and they haven't spoken. That's all I was doing. So,
I understand.
all right.
Doing nothing is not an option, so, yeah, we as a committee, I think it's important that we move forward. That's probably, and actually that's part of what we do. It's part of redevelopment improvement for the city, so, and that's what this is, so, yes.
Okay.
I think it's a great plan. What I do like is we sent a letter, not saying 1, 2, or 3, or 4, but just we approve it and we think it's nice.
You're right.
And we support it. I think it's-
Yeah, and it's really, we're not approving anything.
Right.
All we're saying here is we're endorsing this. We're supportive of the recommendations that Harris is making.
Right,
So,
right.
okay. All right. So any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I just want to get clarification, so, because staff, we're going to work on either putting together a document. Is the motion that there would be a document transmitted to the commission, and just a general letter of support?
Yes.
And then is it then the intention that the staff would prepare that draft letter, bring it back for the board, or this committee to weigh in on the language of that before it gets transmitted, or are you essentially delegating us the ability to just go ahead and do that?
I can draft and bring back to the board if.
I mean, I think the key, I don't think it's a complicated thing here. We're saying it's a general, we are in support, I think I'm okay with authorizing staff to, without being specific, to any one piece of the proposal, say that the board is endorsing this, and we are going to be supportive of the city commission's decision. Because they're still in the.
Is there a reason why we wouldn't want to, is there a hurry? Like if we just saw the letter and then agreed to it?
We have between now and the commission workshop to bring a draft back. Yeah, originally, I think we were thinking there was a tighter time frame, but it's my understanding now that the workshop's in December, so we should have an opportunity to bring a document that the board can provide feedback, just to make sure that it accurately reflects the intent of the board.
Sure. Okay, yeah, so it'll be, to clarify, then what we're saying is we're directing staff to draft a letter, and then we will review and approve it. Okay, thank you. All right. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, like sign? All right, seeing none. Motion passes. Let's see, what else?
By the way, I really enjoyed that you are excited about this project. It brought energy and life into this very unhappy, unpleasant discussion.
And it was cool to hear that you've been working with the Lakeland CRAs for so long too. I mean, that's great to have that kind of institutional knowledge, and that was very cool to hear. Very cool to hear. So.
Will we receive a report from the Lakeland Police Department? Okay.
That's where we are.
Never
Okay,
mind.
all right. Do we have Is that outlined?
It's not, we didn't specifically call it
Okay.
out, but they are here,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
if you'd like to ask.
That was my
officers.
intention. I wasn't going to adjourn without hearing from you guys, because you sat through 2 hours of us talking.
These are two.
We're going to give you a second to talk.
CRA officers.
So, first of all,
We had Linda.
thank you for being here. We really do appreciate your taking time out of off your normal work to come and listen to us make decisions and that kind of thing. But can you, would you mind introducing yourselves for us one more time and tell us how things have been going with in the CRA districts you're patrolling?
Well, I'm Sergeant Henry, one of the supervisors over the neighborhood unit, and the way we've had it structured, we have 4 NLOs on both rotation, plus a CRA officer, plus a homeless liaison officer. So he has been our CRA officer for the past almost 2 years. It's Kevin Shuttler, by the way. Yeah, Kevin Shuttler. I've been in a couple meetings.
Yeah.
But you guys have now decided we want 4 CRA officers. So they have posted that position within the department, and for those 4 positions, we had 5 people apply for it. And Marvin Tarver, our captain, he was supposed to be here today, he had a family emergency, so he couldn't make it at the last minute. But what I was told today was they have the 5 people identified, they're going to set up the interviews, and that should be done in the next couple weeks here, so they will have those 4 officers decided upon. And I know you guys have talked about the scheduling, you went 24-hour coverage for that CRA officer, and so that way you will have someone that, if you need to reach out to someone, they'll have a phone, you call them directly, and you don't have to call the station, you call that officer directly. And that's from what we understand how you want it right now. So, and that could change, we're a very fluid unit, but like I said, we're the unit that covers all the neighborhood stuff. So Officer Shuttler is going to come back to the NLO portion, which is the neighborhood unit. So you'll have 4 brand new CRA officers. They're not new officers. Most of these guys are seasoned. They've been officers for probably the minimum is like 5 years. And with that, Kevin's going to be showing them and introducing them, and so they'll be coming to the meetings as you want them to. But if you don't need them at these meetings, we don't need to be here. But you can always reach out to them, call them anytime they want. And
We do want the officers at the meetings.
Okay. And that's
for the intent, specifically for the intention of giving. We want the officers to be aware of what's going on, and especially I know because we have projects going on in areas that have been problem areas. And it's important I think it's important for us to have everyone have a complete picture of what we're working towards. And the officers are really a key part of it, because so the better connected they are to us and to the people who are coming in and making requests, and like to me, it's such a relationship-oriented thing, a relationship-based position. So just for them being in here, to have an opportunity to shake a hand and get to know a face.
absolutely, yeah,
is incredibly valuable. So, because the property owners and stuff that come through here that are making requests, they're the ones who are going to be calling the officers and saying, hey, I've got an issue, can you come help me? And just having that familiarity is going to make a big difference. So,
yes, and usually a lot of times, they don't call officers, they'll contact the CRA or whatever, which is good to develop. I had a really good relationship with Alana when she was over it, and now it's Shelley. So I'm still getting to know Shelley while I'm still in this position. So they contact her, which they can contact us, and then we can then handle the issues.
exactly.
That are coming in. So, which today, found, I guess, Greg, the one for Peachtree, is he the one, he owns that property now? I should talk to him then, because we gotta get it reboarded back up.
Okay.
They did
So
say they were.
we had a medical situation there yesterday, because what they did is busted the doors in, so they're climbing in, busted a window out, so they're going down the other side. The lady ended up having a medical emergency on the inside. So we had to climb through the windows, tend to her, and then we had the fire come and actually bust the door open,
Yeah.
so we can actually get her out
Yeah.
onto the ambulance.
And then today I was there and I caught 2 people sleeping in there. So, utilizing narcotics, so.
Yeah.
They're no longer there. So we need to get that boarded up as quickly as possible. So where we can kind of alleviate that.
Yeah, that's why like the relationship piece is so key. So, and that will get stronger as these new guys are around, you get to know the property owners and stuff, and like the intention is just to have easy communication, you know, and
Yes, 100%.
a neighbor, like a real, you know, a familiar face, and real relationship with the people who are doing the patrols. So, I appreciate you telling us about that.
Robin, we're hoping like that they do like a daily email, like a summary of what, like over the night guy is going to be kind of on his own. So
Yeah.
we're hoping that maybe we can implement some kind of like just a day, like I said, daily summary of, so you can see that they are doing something in those areas.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, that's all they'll be covering. And I didn't realize how big the CRA was when I first took over this job. But no, I used to think it was just Parker Street, but no, it's the whole city. And, yeah, it's a lot. You guys have done a lot. Tearing down these dilapidated houses has changed the whole outlook of downtown. I mean, it's really cleaned it up a lot. Like we've been out there today. We did a little competition with Alpha Squad on who can make the most arrests. And I think each one of my 5 guys has over 6 arrests for the day. And even Alpha Squad, they're close to that. So you're talking 60 plus arrests today. And probably half of those are in CRA areas.
Wow.
So
If not half.
focus a lot on the Talbot House area and stuff like that, trespassing, sleeping on the sidewalk where they feel like it and stuff like that. So that was one of the things we try to focus a lot of our efforts on. But
That, like, Lake Wire's been a big area that we
Lake Wire,
focused on. That area.
Toby Cantrell's been working really good with that, with their homeless liaison stuff, situations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did just want to clarify that the MOU provides that only one officer needs to attend. I know we'd love to meet everyone, and I'm sure it'd be great, but I just, for clarification, you don't need to send anybody overtime or off duty or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
We're only required to provide one officer.
You'll have a
Usually the
dedicated
CRA
to
officer
you.
that is on that day will be attending the meetings.
Okay.
So whoever comes to the day shift, I mean, might work my schedule around, because obviously the night shift guy's gonna need to know a little understanding what he needs to be doing and stuff like that, because I usually work 6 to 6, 8 to 8, something like that. So.
Right, and then as far as the reporting or whatever, the MOU provides for one report quarterly, which the CRA can weigh in on what exactly you want to see in that report, and they'll accommodate that. But it only provides for one quarterly, so a daily report or anything
But that
would
should
be
be with the
far above
relationship
and
that they
beyond
have,
what you're required to do. Yeah.
That would just be like a courtesy thing. I mean, it's just so they know what's going on, so they feel like they understand, so they don't think we're just not doing anything out there. So to
Okay, I
request a pin
just
drop.
wanted to be clear on what the basic requirements were. I really appreciate, going above and beyond them, but I just wanted you to know what, you weren't required to go that far.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys for popping in here. Chrisanne, did you have a comment?
It was just a suggestion for the 4 new officers, once they're hired, if they could listen to the discussion we had at our last meeting. I think that would help everyone really understand what we as a board are looking for. And then when they're hired, they kind of we don't need to repeat anything that has already been said. So that since that's already on record, they can just listen to that.
Can I just add something? I'm going to be on the hiring process. So I will be at least interviewing and having a conversation with the officers and introducing them to the CRAs and explaining to them what we even do, because I don't know that a lot of them have had that opportunity to discuss what the CRAs do. I know that Kevin and I joked yesterday about him training. So we'll have those conversations, and then we'll be able to bring reports back to you and have lots of good conversations about the work that they already do, and then how they can dive deeper into the CRAs and the work that both of our officers here have been able to do so far. So we'll certainly continue the conversation and bring you guys up to date on progress so far. But thank you both for coming and listening in for a long, healthy, hearty conversation.
Yeah.
So if I can, I'd like to just, this mouse has been crazy, I'm sorry. There are two events I just want to mention. There's the Smart Growth Forum that will be held at the Well on October 11th at 6 p.m. And our esteemed Community and Economic Development Director will be one of the speakers, panelists. Also, I believe Mayor Pro Tem Commissioner McCarley, yes? And I forgot the rest of the panelists.
Gary Ralston, Rick Maxey, Carol Phillips, and
Sarah McCauley.
yeah, she mentioned McCarthy.
And so it's a very healthy dialogue just about smart growth and a lot of development potential for our communities. The bottom is Lakeland Hills Boulevard. It's a public meeting that will be hosted by DOT. I tried to print the flyer, but I'll just email it to you all because there is an in-person option and also a virtual option. But this is, of course, an important corridor. It's from Parkview Place to Granada Place, right in front of the hospital in Midtown. And there's some significant improvements coming. I do believe the CRA has some committed funds, which I have to verify in our CIP. But it's safety, drainage, pedestrian improvements, raised median, mid-block crossings, lots of things going on. But if you have time to tune in or come in person to see what DOT's got planned, they want public input. So it'd be a great meeting for you to pop in if you can. So that's all I had for announcements. Do you have something?
One more.
Go ahead.
All right.
November 3rd at the RP Funding Center is the Gulf Coast Safe Streets Summit.
Oh, yes.
It is paid admission, so if Valerie or her team can send out the information to you, we'll be happy to get you registered. It's going to be quite interactive in and outside of the center with some disability sort of demonstrations for you to realize what it's like for a disabled person to navigate sidewalks and streets and crosswalks. I think there's some transit, hands-on stuff with transit that's going to be there. It's at 9 in the morning, I think until 1 or maybe 3 in the afternoon, something like that.
Which happens to be our board meeting, so it'll come right up to board meeting time. So with that, our next regular board meeting will be on November 3rd.
All right.
That's all I have.
Guys, thank you so much. This was a long one. We did some good work, but we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm excited.
I'm excited.
I know.
The dynamic trio.
Very super.
I'm good.
Human burn. I did. It's already been changed. If not,